Thomas Tuft on Juice FM.
107.6 Juice FM, Thomas Tuft, After Hours with you through till 4 a.m. And I'm very excited because I'm now joined on the phone by a legend, and I do not use that word lightly. Please give it up for Mr. Greg Wilson. Hello, Greg, how are you?
Hi, Thomas. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for a start off for joining us on the show.
No problem.
It's a great honour. So, I mean, you are a legend. I will say that because you've been.
Does that mean I'm old?
Well, maybe. I don't know. Depends which way you want to define it. No, definitely you are. I mean, how would you say you started? What was your big defining moment in music, or what? How was your name really? You know, part of the scene, if you like.
Well, basically, I mean, that all came about due to my association with Manchester in the early 80s and the black scene there. You know, and I was also like the first kind of dance resident at the Hacienda. But before that, my main club was a club called Legend, which was like an incredible night, really upfront black music, all imported from mainly New York. It was the period of like electro funk. It was when the music was changing from a kind of basically, you know, like an old style kind of band set up with musicians and stuff to a more kind of electronic thing that spawned what we know now, you know, like the kind of the three directions of hip hop, house, and techno all kind of developed down to that early 80s period. So that's where I was kind of known for. It was a more underground thing at the time, but I think now with hindsight, people look back to that period and how important it was in terms of what happened later with the rave explosion later in the decade. But really going back, I started out as a DJ on Merseyside. I'm from New Brighton. So back in like the mid 70s, I was doing like the clubs like locally. There was a club called the Chelsea Reach, and then my main place at the time was a place called the Golden Guinea, which still exists now as RJ's. And so I was there for a number of years, and I kind of developed like what I was doing from that side, basically coming in initially into a normal situation, normal kind of crowd, Saturday night out type kind of crowd, but developing that so that people were getting more into imports and more upfront dance music. And by the end of it, I stopped working there in 1980. We had like a really great little scene, you know, it was known like as one of the best places in Merseyside, like to hear kind of disco music and stuff and funk and soul. And so, you know, I mean, I kind of certainly did my apprenticeship in Merseyside.
Did you find that, you know, the more you were playing in these clubs, the more people became open to music? Because I suppose when you started, and it's through a love of music, I mean, myself and a lot of the guys that have been around for a long time, it is not necessarily one particular style of music, it's just a love of just good sort of underground, different music. Did you find that people were becoming a lot more open to it the more you were playing it and, you know, the more DJs kind of got into it?
Well, I mean, basically back then, I mean, that's a difference to what happened later, was that, you know, as a DJ, you played dance music right across the spectrum. You literally, you know, like, you didn't stick in one style or tempo. It was moving around, you know, there was more downbeat stuff, there was up-tempo tracks. You know, as I said, you know, like in, say, in the 70s, I was playing soul, funk, disco, you know, it was like a kind of remit of different music. And later down the line, when I was known for the playing electro funk, I was also playing, you know, like the other strands. I mean, even like jazz and stuff, and what's now termed as boogie, you know, came into that. So it wasn't really until the kind of emergence of the house scene that everything began to segregate off into separate areas. So in a sense, what I'm doing now, even though it's kind of strange in a way, because like younger people think I'm doing something new and different because I'm kind of, you know, drawing from all sorts of areas musically and different styles, and it can move from one thing to another very quickly. Whereas really, you know, in a sense, it's going back to, you know, like an old way again. It's what goes around comes around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's. I mean, do you find it frustrating? I mean, yourself, like how music has. I mean, I do as a DJ. I mean, when I first started, it was a lot different. You know, from the house music. You know, you just played good house music if you were playing in a house club. It might be a bit techy, a bit electronic. It might be disco-y. It might be. But now you kind of pigeonholed as well. You play this kind of house music, or you play that kind of music. Do you find that quite frustrating yourself? You know, from coming from a scene that was a bit more mixed.
Well, yeah. I mean, the 90s especially, I mean, I really, you know, I found it very difficult to get my head around the 90s because of the way that it had all gone, and it had subdivided into such narrow little areas that, you know, it wasn't even a matter of being a house DJ. There was so many different strands to house at that time, and everyone was purely specialising in one small area. And from my point of view, you know, I mean, it's probably one of the reasons why I never came back to DJing in the 90s in any way, because I was kind of tempted at the time, because I was struggling to find my feet, and people were saying, you know, you should maybe make a return, and what they were kind of saying to me was that, you know, get an agent, trade on your past reputation, you'll get gigs off the back of it. And I was saying, yeah, great, can I play a bit of house, a bit of techno, a bit of hip-hop? And they were like, well, no, you're going to have to kind of pick one area. And really, I could never have done that. That was never my approach to things. You know, I can't really see the point of when we've got like such a wide variety of great dance music to narrow down to one small thing. I think a lot of it obviously had to do with, you know, the input of ecstasy and everything, and people, you know, were consuming the dance music, you know, on these kind of levels, that they just wanted it one particular thing for 2-3 hours or whatever it was, so they could just dance and lose themselves in that. But, you know, I do think the music kind of suffered for that. Even now, you know, people like Mike Pickering at the Hacienda, you know, even though the club became world-renowned in the back end of the 80s, you know, with house, basically, he looks back at that period and says it was just before the explosion that he sees as like the crucial time. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yes,
I was saying that Mike Pickering, you know, that he looks back on that period, and even though the house music, you know, is what the Hacienda's known for and what it became world-renowned for, you know, he looks back on that period just before it exploded and everybody kind of discovered the rave scene and everything, and says that was the most precious period because they were still playing like street soul and hip-hop alongside, you know, like the early house releases and everything. And so, yeah, you know, I mean, it did change very, very drastically, but I think now we've come to a point where things are kind of starting to change in a different direction. The music's slowing down a lot more, and people are, you know, generally I'm finding much more open, you know, to a wider remit of music, and that type of person is getting ever younger. You know, I'm very much seeing that, especially within the last 6 months.
Which is a good thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, of course, because that's the energy that you get from it. I mean, the last thing I would have wanted to do is come back into DJing and playing to people, you know, of a similar age group to myself, because that would just have been a purely nostalgic trip, you know, which I'm not into. I mean, you know, the point of rediscovering a lot of this kind of great dance music that's gone before is what we can do with it in the future. You know, how people hear it now and what they kind of take from it, and how they move on to whatever's the next steps. And I think that's the exciting thing. And obviously, that's going to come from a younger age group of people who, you know, are kind of approaching this from a much more pure direction without, you know, any preconceptions of what the music is. They're just hearing it purely for what it is, enjoying it for what it is, and then hopefully on the musical side, bringing in some of these ideas, fusing them with kind of newer approaches to stuff, and hopefully from that we'll get some more hybrids that kind of come out and create, you know, like the future of dance music.
I mean, definitely. I mean, I think, you know, there is a certain amount of people, or there was for a time, that kind of didn't... I really think they didn't sort of accept where sort of house music had come from, you know. I mean, you know, the disco and this, that and the other, and they, what's that? Do you know what I mean? It's the, you know, they didn't really get that side of it, and I think it's good, you know, to have that re-injected, really. You know, you're playing these new edits and stuff, which are, you know, are old records, you know, but they're just revamped and giving that fresh feel to kind of appeal to them kids on the dance floor again.
That's it, and it's like you said, like with disco, it had such a bad name for itself because, you know, like it was, you know, it was in with that kind of image of platform shoes and John Travolta in the white suit, the kind of medallion man type thing, and, you know, it was always like a little bit seen as a little bit cheesy from that aspect. But if you go back actually to the time when it was going on, it was really on the cutting edge. I mean, it's the more commercial side of disco that people think of when they hear that term. it's more like the kind of, Bee Gees, Boney M type ABBA kind of side of it. But what was forgotten was that, a lot of these great records that were made in the 70s, the level of musicianship on them was like phenomenal. All the stuff coming out of Sigma Sounds with the Philadelphia International label and the Salsoul musicians and all these people. These were like really high level musicians that were doing it. And I think people like going back and rediscovering it, kind of a bit shocked at just how good, like the music is. And obviously it's much deeper. You dig down deeper into any level, any style of music, and you'll find things that, you don't kind of notice, on the surface of it. And I think that's what's been happening. The re-edits have been a major kind of thing, because like what you've said, they've put a new slant on older music and made it, work in a more contemporary setting. I mean, it might not even be that there's much done in the edit, maybe a little extension or something, but it just brings a track forward into a different context. And at the end of the day, it literally boils down to a simple thing, there's good music and there's not so good music, and it's always been the same way. And really, like, the technology hasn't changed that drastically in terms of recording since, like the early 80s period. And so, these tracks, even though they may be, 20, 25, 30 years old, they still sound great, today, whereas maybe when they were originally made, records that were made 20, 30 years before that, they would have sounded very different. The production values would have been completely different, and it wouldn't have fitted in. But now, a lot of the time, you can be playing a record from maybe 1982, and then you can play another record from, 2009, and a lot of people wouldn't know which the old one was and which the current one was, because the lines had been completely blurred. A major kind of item within this is obviously the fact that the internet has opened it up for people to explore, a whole history of music. Now if somebody hears a track that they like and they find out what the name of the artist is, they can just go and Google it. They can find out much more information about it. They can find out about maybe the label it was on and other artists that were on that label, or other similar artists of the same period of time. And so, it just opens up a Pandora's box for people. And, we are living in a completely different age where the way people consume the music is so separate to the way that they used to when I was younger. And I think it's a really exciting time because, with the internet makes things global. I'm in a situation now where I go and literally play all over the world, and it's like-minded people, that people in Japan or Brazil or wherever, are coming from the same direction as certain people in the UK. It's still a kind of more underground thing, but it's connected so much that it does reach people everywhere, basically.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you. There's a lot of people, they've got the downsides and the upsides, but I think there is, there's a great positivity to the internet and stuff like, for that simple reason, for people being able to access music that they never would be able to, which is a great thing. You stopped DJing for a long time, and came back. And what was the kind of prompt for you to get back into the club scene again and back into the studio? What was it for you?
Well, basically, I'd never stopped being involved with music throughout all the time I was away from DJing. So I was always, there, sometimes up, sometimes down. It was like a bit of a roller coaster world. But what really changed things for me was that what was the internet. Was becoming aware, of what was online, what websites were going on, what forums, what people were talking about. And the big thing from my point of view was that I realised that, obviously a passage of time had now happened, and the documentation of dance culture in Britain was, it was happening in books, on the internet, on radio shows, and that people were completely missing out, like what happened with the black scene in this country, and that underpinned everything that happened later down the line. It was like it was almost as though people thought that a group of DJs went to Ibiza in 1987 and dance music culture in this country began at that point,
yeah.
Or the Hacienda in 1988, and this is what was like the kind of widely held belief by people who weren't there at the time. And that was what was going into the documentation of it. And so, from my point of view, it was like, well, you can either, grumble about it, or you can do something direct. Unfortunately, I had all my archive material still in my loft upstairs in boxes and stuff, and I just went through it all, and that was like where I looked to start the website, electrofunkroots.co.uk, which basically zoomed in on the early 80s period, and also, showed you that things were happening before that as well, because we've got like an incredible lineage of dance music in this country that goes back into, like the 60s. I mean, even like, people now say a younger person would look at something like, say, the Mersey beat era of the 60s as something to do with the parents, or maybe something to do even with their grandparents, because, there's such a long period of time. But when you think about what was going on there and those bands that were playing in the clubs in Liverpool back then, a lot of the music, more than 50%, so the majority of tracks played, of songs like covered by the bands back then, were by black American artists, often on obscure labels, that they were finding, they were hearing these records, they were copying these records. And out of that, came the Beatles, which obviously changed music throughout the world and everything. And so, that's like an incredible lineage, from a Liverpool point of view, that's just never explored. Whenever, people do document that period of time, it's done in this really nostalgic kind of sense, and it doesn't really link to what's happening now, whereas, I can see a direct link. It was just young people who were really interested in music, who were digging that little bit deeper, who were looking around for things. And then they were like covering these great black American records that they were finding. And out of that, emerged this whole, incredible kind of phenomena. So, that was all going on there. In the 70s in Liverpool, there was a fantastic funk scene. I went to a club called the Timepiece, which was on Fleet Street. It was a predominantly black club. DJ called Les Spain, amazing club. People were travelling from all over the country, US Army bases, and it's not documented like a Wigan casino because, as I say, it was mainly a black crowd that was going to it. I mean, sadly, from Liverpool's point of view, after the riots in '81, it kind of killed the black scene. It meant that, you couldn't put on a decent upfront black music night in the city centre because, the club policy had become very racist in that respect, and people weren't, welcoming to that kind of audience. And that's why I really ended up in Manchester, because you had the complete opposite happening there, where it was a real open-minded period where there was a mixture between the black crowd and like the more indie crowd that was going to places like the Hacienda and like the students and stuff. And out of that came, like the whole indie dance culture, and people like a guy called Gerald doing Voodoo Ray, 808 State, Pacific State, WFL, Happy Mondays, and all their stuff kind of, using dance samples and stuff. And so, Manchester, really stole the march on Liverpool at that particular point in time. But, a lot of people aren't aware that back in the 70s, Liverpool had a fantastic black music scene. When I was playing in my little club in New Brighton, when I look back at some of the records that I played there were huge, huge records. They weren't commercial records, they weren't hit records, but they were being played all over Liverpool because of the influence this club in Liverpool had, the Timepiece, back in the 70s. And so, for people to think that, dance culture starts with rave, is like a huge mistake. And I think one of the main things that's happened in recent years is that a lot of people have started to look before that and just see, just how rich this culture is and how deep it runs and how far back it goes. And so, yeah, it's good to, have been able to contribute to that via the website. And, it was because of the website that people, approached me and said, do you fancy DJing? And it developed from there.
That's great. It's great to feel like a part of history, and it's great to be able to tell your story as well, I suppose, a forgotten story, I suppose, by many probably, you're absolutely chock-a-block, aren't you, at the moment? You seem to be everywhere.
No, it is. It's gone a bit mad, especially, in the past 12 months. It's fantastic. It's really good. I haven't had time to draw a breath since I got back from, I was in, back end of last year, I literally went round the world. I went to the States, and then I came back for a couple of weeks. But then I did Japan, Australia, and Brazil. And since then, I just, as I say, I haven't had time to, just like kind of sit back and take it all in. And everything's just really accelerated since there. That, for for example, I mean, I'm off to Amsterdam this week, and then Austria for Snowbombing, then Brussels. I've just got back from Portugal, and then, you know, I mean, I've got the run of the gigs, the one at Archive in Liverpool, which I'm really looking forward to, because Liverpool's one of the, strangely, I play Liverpool less than some of the overseas
It's always the way, Greg.
So
it's always
that's about to change, though. This like... apart from Archive, I'm going to be doing Circus in a couple of months' time as well, and so there'll be more Liverpool gigs coming up. But you know, it's really, you know, I'm really looking forward to this night. There's a real vibe about it. I think the fact as well it's on Easter Thursday, it just gives it like a little special edge. And so yeah, you know, I mean, Chris Duckenfield going to be there too, and so that should be a really good night. And then, you know, on the back of that, you know, I'm kind of into a whole series of like UK dates as well, you know, and then we're into the summer, and then we're into the festivals, and back end of the year that's already planned, because I'm going to be going back to, you know, Japan, Australia, and these kind of states again and stuff. And so yeah, you know, I mean, it's fantastic. You know, I'm really kind of you know, sometimes, you know, when I kind of think about it, you know, it's amazing, you know, the way that it's developed in that way, from basically, you know, like kind of complete obscurity to, you know, like being, you know, in demand from these far-flung places. But as I say, you know, like the people worldwide are the same, you know, I mean, there's a real sense of, you know, like, you know, a younger kind of mind that's looking back at a whole history, not just musically, but in general, and taking the cues in a completely different way than maybe what people would be doing 20 years ago. So it's a very, very interesting time, you know, for how things are going to develop from here.
Well, I'm certainly glad you're playing all over us, because I can come and see you. Because I'm, you know, come and get, because, you know, it's Train Spotter's paradise a bit in it. Come on. I mean, I know for a fact I'm definitely going to be there. That's the Leaf Tea Shop and Bar, Thursday the 9th of April. That is a bank holiday Thursday. Greg's alongside Chris Duckenfield of Swag, I do believe. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's going to be one hell of a night. I know all the boys are coming out for that, all the 3 Beat Boys and Pez and everybody.
I'll see Pez.
Yeah.
Pez had a part in all this. He like, you know, he kind of rediscovered one of my very old mixes from 1982, and actually, you know, re-recorded it bit for bit, and that kind of went out there, you know, not too long ago. So yeah, Pez has seen this development from, you know, its earliest stages.
Good old Pez flying the flag as usual, eh?
Yeah.
It's all good. Well, Greg, I'm certainly going to be dropping some stuff. I have done before on the show, and I absolutely adore you. I think you're fantastic, and it's great to see you back out there and doing your thing again, educating people where you should be. Thank you so much for joining me, Greg, and I'll speak to you soon. Take it easy.
Yeah, it's right, Thomas. Nice one, mate. You take care.
Thanks, mate.
Thomas Tuft on Juice FM.